If you follow China's economy, you've probably heard about the extent of Chinese people's frugality. When looking at per capita consumption, expenditure, and consumption, the money Chinese people spend each year is less than 1/10 of what Americans spend. Even compared with Mexicans, who have a similar per capita GDP to the Chinese still spend only about half as much. But are Chinese people really that stingy? Or perhaps these economic indicators themselves are misleading? Recently, two Chinese economists, Yu Fei and Guo Kai, published a paper that used physical consumption volumes, meaning the amount of tangible products consumed, to assess China's actual consumption level. Mexico, Japan, the United States, France, and Germany were chosen as peer groups. Mexico for its similar per capita GDP, Japan for its cultural proximity, and France and Germany as representatives of advanced economies. The results are quite eye-opening. They suggest that Chinese consumption has been significantly underestimated. They compared physical consumption volumes across four categories: food, manufactured goods, housing, and services, and found that China has already surpassed developed countries in multiple indicators. Even in areas where China still lags, the gap with these five countries is far smaller than the gap in per capita GDP. Specifically, in terms of food consumption, the authors examined per capita calorie supply between 1961 and 2021. China's upward trajectory is the steepest. Around 2003, it surpassed Japan. In 2013, it overtook Mexico, and by 2022, it had caught up with France and Germany, reaching 90% of the US level. Not only is calorie intake sufficient, but Chinese diets are also highly nutritious. Comparing per capita protein supply over the past 60 years, the data for China shows rapid growth. By 2021, China's per capita protein intake had reached 125.9 grams per day, the highest among the six countries. Next, the authors turned to manufactured goods, including clothing, footwear, household appliances, electronics, and automobiles. On clothing, Chinese people buy about 22 items per year, roughly the same as Mexicans. The figure is 37 for Japan, 43 for France, 55 for Germany, and 90 for the United States. On footwear, Chinese people purchase about 2 pairs per person annually. Similar to Japan and Mexico, France and Germany average 3 to 3.5 pairs, while American buys 5.6 pairs, with some statistics show as many as 8. In large household appliances, the gap narrows further. In some cases, due to climate and lifestyle differences, China even surpassed some developed nations. For example, in air conditioners, China leads with 31 units per 1,000 people, compared with 8 in Mexico, 13 in France, and 26 in the United States, while Japan tops the list with 78 units. Electronics is a category where the sharpest differences are observed. For example, in laptops, China had 10 units per 1,000 people in 2024, behind Mexico's 15 and far below the US, France, and Japan and Germany. For television and tablets, China lags significantly behind the other countries. Finally, in automobiles, while still lagging behind advanced economies, China is catching up quickly. Per capita car purchases rose from 18 per 1,000 people in 2019 to 22 in 2024, already higher than Mexico, but still below the US, Germany, Japan, and France. The authors conclude that Chinese consumption of manufactured goods is broadly comparable to that of peer economies and only significantly below advanced country levels. The third part of the study compared housing situation. Look at per capita living space and number of housing units per 1,000 people. Here again, the disparities are small. China averages 387 housing units per 1,000 people, compared with 591 in France, at 1.3 times that number in Japan and 1.1 times in the US. Mexico trails China with 278. Per capita living space in China is 38.8 square meters, compared with 39.6 in Mexico, 45.8 in Japan, 53.6 in Germany, and 58.8 in France, and 62.9 in the US, only 1.2 to 1.6 times China's level. Finally, the study turned to services, measured by expected years of schooling, life expectancy, and frequency of travel. In education, China has made rapid progress since the expansion of compulsory and higher education in the 1990s. Average expected years of schooling rose from 8.6 in 1990 to 15.2 in 2011. By 2010, China had caught up with Mexico. By 2022, it matched Japan, with less than a 1-year gap with France and US and less than 2 years with Germany. In life expectancy, the improvement is even more dramatic. From 53 years in 1965 to 78 in 2023, before 2004, China's life expectancy was roughly the same as Mexico's. By 2020, it has surpassed the US, with the gap with Japan, France, and Germany continuing to shrink. In tourism, domestic travel rose steadily, peaking at 4.2 trips per person in 2019, exceeding France and approaching Japan. International travel was lower, at 0.11 trips per person in 2019 compared with Japan, the US, Mexico, and France. In summary, China's service consumption suggests the residents' spending on education and healthcare already delivers outcome comparable to developed countries. Tourism lacks somewhat, but the gap is far smaller than implied by per capita spending. To conclude, the paper includes a comparative table that shows China's physical consumption relative to the other countries. Red font marks categories where China has overtaken others. Yellow highlights where China's gap is smaller than its GDP gap. Returning to the original question, are Chinese people really unwilling to spend? The answer largely depends on measurement. But regardless of how it is calculated, China's hundreds of billions of dollars in annual trade surpluses are a reality. As the authors note, if China's economic model can shift from being investment and export-driven to more consumption-driven, it would not only improve citizens' welfare but also help ease global trade imbalances.